Last Epoch's in-game. Is it any good? Let's talk about it. When you hear in-game of Last Epoch discussed, you're pretty much always going to be hearing about the monolith system, though there is more, in my opinion, to the in-game than just the monolith system. So let's talk about the monolith system itself first. What makes it good? What makes it bad? Is it enough? And then we're going to talk about the other aspects of in-game. So what are monoliths? Monoliths are like nightmare dungeons from Diablo 4 or maps if you're familiar with Path of Exile. It is a way in which to get you into instanced areas to fight a variety of mobs with a variety of bonuses associated with them, with a variety of item and reward drops related to them. Now, I'm in empowered monoliths, which is the in-game portion of it, but in order to get to empowered monoliths, you have to do the normal monoliths first. You're going to notice on the left here, there is quest echoes, there is stability at the top, and the rewards I get for completing each one of these instances of monoliths will give me bonus timeline stability, with a minimum amount being the first amount you see in the bottom right, and the bonus amount being up to the bonus amount depending upon if I decide to full clear the map or not. Most people do not full clear the map as you're going through it, as it is faster just to blast through, as very often the objectives are short, to get your reward and then end it. And I'm going to run one of these non-empowered monoliths just to give you an idea of how it works. So here's a map. It says destroy both void spires. If you see, it marks on the map these circles for me, so I know exactly where to go. Very often your gameplay will look something like this, which is running past, or if you have a build like a whirlwind bar build or something, killing them on the go. But for me, I'm just going to run right past, kill the void spire. Now I'm going to continue to move past, only killing things along the way or picking up. Oh, there was an item that dropped back here and marks it on my map. That is a unique item, and I do want that one. So I'm going to make room in the inventory. Holy moly. Hold on one second here. Kill these guys before I die. So make room in the inventory in order to actually get this item. Should have made room earlier. Okay, so there's an item. Now I'm going to continue and pick up gold. This is a pretty good example of a run because this is more or less what my runs look like. Kind of running through, click on any of the shrines that there may be, get to the end. Every now and then you're going to see one of these. These are exiled mages or exiled dudes that give you bonus experimental gear, which is quite often pretty interesting gear with different affixes that you can't get outside of it. You can see there that has different affixes on it than you normally would have, and that would when we're talking about the crafting portion of the game. Okay, now we're here to the Void Spire. We're going to do the Void Spire. It is now over. I'm going to open up my portal and get out of here, and I will receive the rewards that were marked by the map. So if I go here, these are the ones that were marked as the reward, and then this is just a normal chest that you get after doing any of them. So that reward in that first chest, for instance, this one would be a key. See how it says Echo Reward Arena Key? That first chest is your Echo Reward, and now I have more stability, and you can see that green bar up here shows me how much stability I would gain if I do this one, for instance, and then the second bar is if I 100%ed the bonus timeline stability. So as you go through stability, it's going to unlock these quests. There will be 3 different quests to do. Once you've done all of the quests, effectively done enough of the monolith instances in order to get enough stability to unlock and do these quests, then I can go to the next monolith, which will be a higher level monolith. You continue this process over and over and over again. If you're wondering what the quests themselves are, very often it's something very similar, like another map with another type of objective. And then the last one is typically a boss fight, and the boss fights can be rather enjoyable. So we're loading into the Echo. One of the things I will mention about the game is you do get loading time issues sometimes, but I've heard that they are working on that. So if you go here, this is another one where there's multiple objectives. So I will find some guys at the end of this, and I'm not going to complete this full one for the sake of the video, but if you can see there's a question mark over there, and there's a question mark down there, I have to go talk to those 2 people and then talk to somebody at the end, fight the boss at the end. I've already done that one before, and then that one will be over and I can move on. Now I've already completed these ones. So once you have done these monoliths and you continue to do these monoliths over and over and over again, then you get to the opportunity to empower your monoliths. This is the monolith map, and what I was talking about, how you start with monoliths and then they go harder and harder. For instance, 58 is the first one, then 62, 70, etc. You can kind of pick your direction through here to the different monoliths, and you can see the avenue that I picked. But once you're at all the way through all of them, okay, which is basically the same process I just showed. Then you can empower them. So you can go to one of the monoliths you might enjoy, and the monoliths do, as you complete them, give you reward bonuses for completing them, so you can sort of target farm. If you notice down here, it says increased ring shard drop rate. If I look at this one, this is resistance drop rate. So when you complete those echo quests that I was telling you about here on the left-hand side, when you're in one of these, then you get a reward associated with that. Okay, now empowering the monolith is sort of the same thing. You go to the monolith, and now I can do a legendary one. You can see corruption also increases the rarity of echo rewards. So what we can do is we can now corrupt it with no maximum corruption. Now you can notice this has a maximum corruption of 50. So what is corruption? Well, corruption is as you're going through the monolith, some of these instances here will have like a boss fight, for instance, and you can add corruption to it, or as you do your quest echo here, you can see gain 1 gaze of Orbis when you complete the required quest echo. When you defeat the shade, increases the timeline corruption. However, if you die while fighting the shade, the gaze of Orbis will be lost. So effectively, you can go through and you can continue to do these missions in order to gain more and more and more corruption, which gives you basically better and better loot. It is an infinite a recursive type of grind. You're going to continue to do these maps over and over again, get more rewards associated with them, and then they are going to be gaining stronger affixes and becoming more difficult, and the boss can have RNG related affix, etc. So basically, if you're wondering what the in-game grind is like in Last Epoch from a monolith standpoint, which is one of the only things that I've seen people talk about, really, it is a instanced over and over again. They get stronger and stronger, and that has a no ceiling to it. Imagine this sort of like nightmare dungeons from Diablo 4 with no ceiling cap and with a little bit more variety in terms of you being able to pick which way you want to go, with the added bonus of being able to target farm things because of the way the reward system happens, and also, in my opinion, better bosses, because the bosses can be quite cool. I will say I find the monolith system to be, in its current iteration, not that exciting, if I'm being bluntly honest with you guys. That does not mean that I am completely unaware that the devs themselves have said that one of their first focuses will be to improve this system. This is something that apparently most people that have been playing the game a long time tend to agree with, which is that the monolith system is all right. It's not a huge detraction from the game, but it's also not a giant selling point of the game either, in my own personal opinion. It's if the monolith system was the only thing I felt like I was engaging with in terms of working on my characters, then I would, in fact, feel like it is a detractor. But it is not the only thing that I'm doing in the in-game. I want to give you an example. There are legendary items that have potential. For instance, this item right here has legendary potential. So what the legendary potential allows me to do is to take an item of similar type, like I would need a chest plate, that has like an exalted, which an exalted stat is the purple stat that just makes it exceptionally strong for that one affix. And then I can crunch these together by running a dungeon called the Temporal Sanctum that will RNG pick one of the stats here on my exalted item and throw it onto the legendary item. This might sound like fairly simple crafting, but the legendary potential of the items actually adds more variety in terms of gameplay itself, because you need to go do the Temporal Sanctum. There is some RNG behind the crafting, for instance, as well, because you might not get the stat you want, and opens you up a little bit outside of the gameplay loop of just monolith, monolith, monolith. Does monolith, monolith, go out, work on your gear, try to get lucky with the RNG-based crafting type of system, see what happens there. There's also other dungeons that break up this monolith gameplay loop, and I actually think the dungeons are one of the better parts of the game. So for instance, there are multiple tiers of dungeons that go up to the highest level in the game, so you are not stuck to just doing monoliths, and there is reason to do the dungeons. So if you go here, for instance, this is the Lightless Arbor. Now you can go into the Lightless Arbor with the key that you get from doing the monoliths, and the dungeon itself has multiple tiers. You can see tier 4 I have yet to unlock. There's tier 1, 2, 3, and they go up to level 100, which basically ramps the difficulty of them. The dungeons are well done, in my opinion, because there are mechanics associated with the dungeons. For instance, if I go into the dungeon itself, there are 3 current dungeons in the game. I actually wish there was more. When I go into the dungeon, you're going to notice I have this mechanic of this light here. Now you can actually read what it does. While the burning amber is attached to you, it loses illumination when you're hit, reducing the radius in which it illuminates the enemies. The illumination loss, depending upon the damage dealt, as a percentage of your maximum health, and it can be restored by killing the ambers, and the enemies outside of the amber's light deal much more damage and take much less damage, aka you need to illuminate your enemies or else they are going to become quite difficult. This is not the only mechanic with this. Eventually you're going to get to a tree boss, and the tree boss itself, you have to use the light to burn his roots, is a really cool mechanic in the game. You can see I'm taking more damage from these guys, but as you get closer, for instance, the damage would lessen for these guys because they are now being illuminated, and you can maneuver this around as you see fit, and you got to make sure you got to kind of kill the guys that have light. So I actually think the dungeon system is not only well explained by itself by making you actually play through the game. For instance, the boss door, even to get to the boss itself, requires you to do the same mechanic that would be killing him. And this is what I wanted to show you. When you get to the door here, you use your kindling to actually light this fire. So I'll have to move the kindling here, and it's going to slowly burn down this. You can see up here, light the kindling to get through. And this is just to get to the next door. And the reason they do this is to teach you this mechanic, because once you get to the boss, you must know that mechanic in order to defeat the boss. Before the boss, there is a boss room. This is to allow everyone, because this is a co-op game, this allows everyone to be able to join into the game. And then you can see here, this is the boss. Really cool at the end here. Mountain Breath, you can see he's immune to damage. I cannot hurt him, so what you have to do is actually destroy the walls and then throw. I'm doing a low-level dungeon, by the way, just so I can talk and not die in this dungeon. And then you can see here, I throw the kindling in here, which lights this on fire, and then he's going to be summoning minions. Again, this would be a lot harder if I was doing one that was not insanely low level compared to what I am. I just want to be able to show this to you. So then this goes, lights it on fire, and that does that side. You can see he's slowly on fire on that side. So then I got to go over here, destroy the kindling, and then set on fire again with the mechanic over here on this side. A lantern nearby will light the kindling, so it kind of explains it, but you can understand why they have to do the door the way they do it. That way you can understand the mechanic before you get to the boss, or it can be quite confusing because the boss has a health bar, you just can't hurt him. Then it burns him down, and then at this point you go inside of his mouth basically, and you're going to find a heart in the middle. Now the heart's going to have its own mechanics. This is basically like the next phase of gameplay here, and these would be difficult mechanics again if I wasn't high enough level. And then just like that, and then eventually you end up fighting the boss here. At the end, you kill the boss. Boom, it is over. And there would be more mechanics that would happen if I didn't just one-shot him. Now we are at the end of the dungeon, and we get our reward for the end of the dungeon. You have a stash here, which will allow me to store items that I might have acquired from it. Then I have the vault, and I can see adds a chest to drop several items. So I can accept what I want to do with my gold. Yes, okay, I accept. Adds a chest that drops a rare helmet, and you can see it costs more and more gold, and you get different items. All items from every chest have a chance to be duplicated, and you can see my gold here. It's getting more and more expensive. Runes of Shattering, now 83%. Drops many runes and glyphs. Yes, I want that. Drops 15% more items, multiplicative. Adds a chest to drop several rare items. So you can basically go and take as many of these modifiers as you want. This is almost like ROG from Path of Exile, for instance, and then you're going to enter your vault, having achieved the dungeon and with the modifiers that you choose, and then you go in here, and just like that, there are your rewards, and now you're going to get yourself your rewards. And then obviously we have the stash in which we can take all these rewards, put away what we want, throw away the stuff we don't want. So I think this is a pretty cool example of how the dungeons are well done. The Temporal Sanctum has you swapping between timelines in order to defeat the boss with its in-game mechanic. The Sapphire Bastion has you almost doing as Simon Says of swapping between red and green in order not to die to the dungeon mechanics and survive the boss, and there is rewards associated with them. The Temporal Sanctum lets you do the legendary potential I was explaining earlier, and the Sapphire Bastion is another way of sort of gambling souls that that you collect along from the dungeon in order to target farm down the exact item slots that you might want to be upgrading. My bummer about the dungeon is they are well done enough to the point that I wish there was more of them. As it stands, there are only the 3 I mentioned. However, there is one other thing in the game which seems to me like it might actually be the true in-game other than the monolith. Let me show you. Every now and then, you're going to get a key called an arena key. The arena key allows you at an area called Champion's Gate to begin a wave sort of horde-based mode that allows you to go all the way to limitless. For instance, if I put in a normal key, it just starts in normal, but you can also acquire arena key of memory, which begins with 100 waves already completed. Just so you know, there's ways to do it. So I can enter the arena. Now you're going to notice there's tier 1, tier 2, there's going to be tier 3 and 4, but there's also the endless arena, which is a level 100 arena that allows you to climb a leaderboard based upon how far you're actually able to go. And you can see scales from your character level to level 100 over the first 80 waves. And then after that point, it's just going to continually go over and over and over and over again. I actually think this is the coolest mode in the game, in my own personal opinion. So we load into the arena. And then what the arena allows us to do here, this is a level 87 arena because my character is level 87 and it will scale exactly like I said earlier, is the mode is just going to start and there it says slay waves of enemies. That's all you really got to worry about. They're going to come to me. Now, there also will be shrines on the screen that we can pick up for each of the different areas. And you can see it went from wave 1 to wave 2. If you look top right, you'll see the waves will get progressively harder. And I can pick up these shrines. There's only so many of them per area. Continue the wave until we get to wave 3, and then wave 4, wave 5, etc., etc. Eventually, we'll get to wave 40, and there will be a champion we need to defeat that can have even better rewards. If you're wondering why I'm one-shotting everything, that's sort of what my build is supposed to do. Okay, wave 5 completed, and then we can either abandon the run or attempt harder waves. I'm going to attempt harder waves. So it starts pretty mild, but then you get more and more and more minions, and they become stronger and stronger. Wave 10, collect your loot and press onwards. So then if you look on the map here, you're going to notice there are chests here I can collect, which is basically my loot for this portion. I can get it, and I can continue to even harder waves, which would take me to a different map. Now that we're on wave 10, and we would do this sort of over again. Now, a couple of things you might be thinking when you're looking at this. I don't like standing still. I prefer blasting through my maps. Well, the arena mode might not be for you. I actually quite enjoy the portion of like them coming to me. This is one of my favorite parts of it, but it's probably not for everybody. The other part of it is you might not care about a leaderboard or endless waves, but I do think it is cool to have that opportunity in the game. And it seems to me like a good way of being able to see exactly how strong your build is. And that's when we're going to talk about what, in my opinion, is the funnest part of the game when you get to in-game, which is sort of min-maxing your build, crafting, and diversifying your characters. Basically making either new characters or swapping from one build to another and figuring out exactly how to get your build exactly the way you want it, because it's pretty easy to respec. Since I've been playing the game, my paladin that I picked has swapped builds 3 different times, and it was never an issue to do so. I swapped originally from running like Smite Shield to like a 2-handed Warpath, which is like Whirlwind Barb, and then back to a shield with no weapon, Judgment kind of One Punch Man style of thing here. And you can do this very easily by respecking your passive points. I mentioned this in my previous video, but the respecking is very easy. The skill respecking is quite cool as well. If you drop and respec one of these skills, because you get higher level with these skills, your minimum level rises. So it will start me at level 10, and then you get boosted experience until you're caught back up to where you were before as you continue to level your character. So this makes it very easy to swap specs and re-level the other abilities that maybe you weren't currently using in case you get different drops, in case you want to try different builds, or in case you are min-maxing things. For me, I had to change my gear once I got these gloves, which means my passive tree changed, my items actually changed. I needed to focus on attunement, what resistances I had, I needed to change, etc. And so for that reason, having the ease of respec gave me longevity to the same character going into the end game, because I didn't feel like, oh no, now I have to make a new character. So currently in the iteration of the game, while it doesn't have, let's say, the depth of the mapping system Path of Exile does, it does actually have an easier way for you to take your same character and do different styles of builds and diversity, even if the amount of things to do in the game is less. So there is some yin-yang to it. In its current iteration, I think if the game launches exactly as it is with the updates mentioned, that people will enjoy the game significantly. Eventually, in a week or two, we're going to get towards the in-game system, and I think people will become bored with the monolith system. Now, you might ask yourself, well, hey, ARPGs are basically in-game games, and if the in-game is, in your opinion, like a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10, isn't that not a good enough situation? And we are right back into the issue of Diablo 4 having no in-game. It could be, but my answer to this is that the core skeleton of what this game is starting at a much higher base. For instance, for at the launch of the game. The way that the skill and passive tree works is phenomenal. The monolith system, while I think they need to flesh it out more, and I'll talk about how in just a moment, is set up significantly better with both the pathing systems, as well as the way to level to 100, as well as the target farming ways of having it, as well as having the stability quest reward function of it, so that the variety you are experiencing can very easily ramp up very quickly by them adding more activities within each of the instances. For instance, the one I showed you earlier where I opened it up and there was like an exiled mage in there, all they have to do is start adding more basically season mechanics into it, as opposed to just adding a higher tier nightmare dungeon or something. All they have to do is juice up a little bit of the variety within the system they've already created. Effectively, what I'm saying is the core game is good, has a good skeletal structure, and with the seasons, basically the cycles is what they're calling them in this game, it will be very easy for them to add into the monolith system more variety with whatever cycle-based mechanics they choose to add going into the game's future. I think this is a great base. If this was what it was going to be forever, and they were not already mentioning that they're focused on the monolith in-game system, if the game was not just now coming out and we're years down the road, or if we didn't have the season base in which can add in variety to the monolith system, I would say the in-game, in my opinion, is lacking. As it stands, I think it will be fine for the release, and within a cycle or two, they're going to have more variety most likely in it. And if the other side of the dungeons were not good, if this was all there was, I again would be saying it is lackluster, but the dungeons are quite enjoyable. And if the crafting system with the legendary potential and the ease of changing your builds was not in the game, I once again would be saying that the in-game is lackluster. But because we can have that variety in the game, I think it is a good skeletal structure. The game is still worth $35, in my opinion. This is not a $70 quadruple A game. It is correctly priced. I think you'll enjoy your time getting the monoliths. Then I think you'll enjoy your time in monoliths, and a couple weeks on the same character without changing your build and just grinding monoliths, you will become bored. That is my personal opinion in the game's current iteration. I feel like I'm being fair. I have the last Epoch devs have been on my podcast I do with Ghazi, and they're coming again on the podcast on Monday. So if you would like to see me interview them, you can come to the live stream. I have the link down below to my live streams as well. You're welcome to come watch me experience the in-game. So I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but this is currently my real feelings and how I feel about the in-game. It's worth $35 still. It's all right. It's a good skeletal structure, and I think it will improve going into the future.